Awesome. Okay, great. So I just want to welcome you. I think we should start now. What do you think, Terence? Maybe wait a bit more for people to join?
I think we got a bunch of people in here. I'm
Okay,
happy to
amazing.
kick it off. Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's do this. Amazing. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining. So today we're going to talk about Cartridge, one of my favorite company in all crypto right now, and my beloved and amazing founder Terence, who's going to be our guest today and talk about what those guys are building, which I cannot emphasize how excited I am by their work, by how groundbreaking what those guys are doing. And so to uh, to start very quickly, I would love to get. So I'm just myself very briefly. I'm Louis. I'm the ecosystem lead at Starknet, and I've been following what Cartridge has been doing since inception. And so I would love to welcome Terence and ask him if he can introduce himself, share a bit about Cartridge and how they came to building it and what's the vision behind it.
Sure, happy to. Thank you for having me. And hello, everyone. I'm Terrence. I'm one of the co-founders of Cartridge, where we're building on-chain games, tooling, and infrastructure. Along with that, a framework you may have heard about, Dojo, and we can talk a little bit about both of them today, and how they complement each other and what kind of is the long-term strategy there. My journey into the on-chain gaming space started about 2 years ago when we started the Dope Wars project, and as part of that, started building a fully on-chain game, a recreation of a cult classic called Drug Wars, early on in the Starknet network's journey. I think it was like alpha. It was definitely way too early to do something so ambitious, but the I really fell in love with the approach from a technical perspective, like the long-term approach to scalability that Starknet and Starkware is taking, and recognized that it was the unlock that we needed to um, enable these complex applications and unlock like the compute necessary to do it in a way that doesn't have significant trade-offs in the security model. So we started very early on. We started building a game called Roll Your Own. We quickly recognized that it wasn't practical to ship to production, and there were a lot of different gaps. But realized also the potential of this idea of fully on-chain games in autonomous worlds. So we started Cartridge about a year and a half now, and have been executing towards like enabling and realizing this idea of fully on-chain games in autonomous worlds ever since then. And I think today we're quite close. We have a lot of games and applications in production. I think like a lot of the technical limitations have been lifted. And now the kind of the technology is in the hands of creators, and we're starting to build up like a very vibrant ecosystem around that. So yeah, happy to share more.
I mean, that's that's a fantastic journey you already told. And then first of all, curious because maybe not everyone here is familiar, but what's your case for the need for on-chain game? Why do we need those, and what the sort of like vision and what as a game developer to use those autonomously?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think this idea of fully on-chain games is, I think, like a new genre of kind of interactive experiences that we're building on top of the blockchain. And like the unique thing they can do is they can inherit like the properties of the blockchain. I think like one simple analogy to think of to compare it to like traditional game development is like in traditional game development, you have like a publisher that operates a bunch of servers, and those servers are typically hosted in like AWS, or like some cloud infrastructure service, and they're completely in control of the publisher and opaque outside of the APIs that the developers like intentionally provide to people building on top of that platform. And the implication of this is like pretty significant. Like for example, it's in most cases, I mean, in almost all cases, it's impossible for a third-party developer to make some modification to the core logic of a game, like the core game mechanics, and to extend and expand it and build like very interesting mods that are deeply integrated with a gaming universe. And there's also like a bunch of inherent platform risks associated with that. Like the world can shut down, or like the game can shut down on a whim, like, as soon as it becomes not profitable for a publisher. Not necessarily that no one cares about it anymore. Like there might still be a lot of people that care about this experience and have invested a lot of time, but if there's no like profitable business model, then it'll be shut down. So I think, like, like the interesting affordances that an on-chain game or autonomous world can inherit from a blockchain is basically like, you know, persistence is one very interesting one. Like the game universe can exist for as long as someone wants it to, right? Like everyone, like the blockchain is basically like opening up the server that used to be siloed inside of a publisher's like cloud infrastructure, to the point that anyone can operate it. Like anyone that has some motivation to perpetuate the world can operate it and keep it alive. And given like and with smart contract platforms like what Starknet provides, you can have extensibility and composability as a core affordance of these worlds. So you can have ecosystems built around them that can be very deeply integrated into the core uh, logic of a game, right? And so you can
Yeah.
have, an ecosystem of participants that can collectively govern and build, and over time you can build up a lot of leverage and compounding effects as people contribute and build on top of it. And by removing basically all the platform risk, I think there's a lot of new emergent experiences that will start to be built, and it becomes practical, for example, to fund a company that's building a game on top of a game kind of thing, which today is almost impossible to
I
do.
mean, I love that. I mean, when I try to explain this thesis to people and on-chain gaming, I always make this reference to, actually I have two references which I use to explain that. Which is the first one being the the movie Ready Player One. I didn't read the book, but I saw the movie, and there is something that
Hmm.
I loved, but it's weird to me in this movie when you think about it, is how the hell how the heck the fate of the world is dependent on who is owning this game company. If you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying. There is
Hmm.
something very dystopian about the fate of the whole universe, of the whole world, basically depending on who's going to inherit this company that controls this big video game where everyone lives. And there's a
Yeah.
second one from sorry, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is definitely a dystopian kind of universe in that regard, right? Like,
Yeah, but no one talks
yeah.
about it in the movie. It's kind of interesting. And there is a second one, which is like a fantastic episode from people who are familiar with, from 99% Invisible in 2015. They made a post about the end of life of Sims Online and how heartbreaking the people who were still playing the game at the very last day were when they shut down the servers. I mean, just give you a bit of perspective from people who are not very familiar with like the philosophical aspect, what it means to actually own those games and run them forever.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, but so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it becomes like increasingly important as people start to like more and more of like the culture and society moves online to digital experiences, and people spend more and more time in these immersive experiences. It becomes like really important to remove the like the leverage of platform providers, like things that don't exist in the real world, right? Like,
Yeah,
uh, you know, yeah.
that makes sense. And so, my question to you then, as Cartridge, is what's the goal, the company's goal? What do you guys aim for? What do you want to achieve? And what are the different vertical product line tool and service that you are creating?
Yeah, so one of the first, yeah, when we first started tackling this problem, the Starknet ecosystem was still, on the Cairo Zero, and it was quite early. One of the first challenges that we tried to address was more on the uh, player side of player onboarding. So, like, there was a few different games building in the Starknet ecosystem. One of them, Roller on like Influence and the Realms guys and Topology. Those are kind of some of um,
The
the people
OGs.
that were the OGs building games, and we wanted to help like facilitate the process of getting players onboarded and experiencing that, and allow them to play test and stuff like that. Um, we built out something called the Cartridge controller, which was basically uh, a, a, a wallet that leverages account abstraction with something that Starknet has natively to allow players to use WebAuthn to create accounts and to sign session tokens and have great experiences playing games where you don't, make it very easy to create an account without having like seed phrases and stuff like that, and then like session tokens to abstract a lot of the transaction signing overhead. So that was one of the first products that we developed. It still exists today, but we've have less focus on it right now. And we started putting a lot of our efforts now into building from the developer side up rather than from the player side down. And we'll come back to the controller at some point in the future, I imagine. Um, for the past year, we've been focusing on building out the Dojo ecosystem in collaboration with a few other participants. So Dojo is a provable game engine. The development of it coincided with the release of Cairo 1, where it started to make a lot of sense to invest a lot of time and effort into building tooling and frameworks in the Starknet ecosystem. It provides like a high level abstraction on top of Cairo using like the extensible Cairo compilation pipeline to make it easy for developers to define on-chain worlds that inherently have these attributes of composability and extensibility. Essentially, it uses a pattern that allows any participant to like register new state into the world and create new logic in the world. So enabling this like this idea of these emergent like composable ecosystems. And that's been quite successful for us is inside of the Dojo community, which has grown like quite tremendously over the last year. We have a bunch of different teams and studios building games, and I think over 50 contributors now to the repository. We have a few different tool chains. Like one of them is Katana, which is the sequencer, a gaming specific sequencer that we operate. And Tori, which is what's called an automatic indexer. So it's something similar to like the graph or something, but you don't have to write any code for it. It understands a world because like worlds have this property of introspection. So it can like from the on-chain representation understand all the different models and everything inside the world and automatically generate GraphQL and gRPC APIs and then some client stuff. But I just mentioned this because like this is kind of part of one of the products that we're providing, and I think is maybe a little bit of the topic of this space is, which is Slot. And Slot is a managed infrastructure as a service platform that we're providing at Cartridge. It's a little bit different of approach from most people that we've seen with like app chains, because almost everyone is basically focused right now on like layer 2 app chains that sell to Ethereum. And almost all of them are, optimistic rollups. And we're leveraging like the unique affordances provided by ZK to execute on the fractal scaling roadmap, which is actually a roadmap that like the Starkware team laid out, I think almost like 2 years ago now,
Yeah, 2 years
which
ago.
is yeah, which is like uniquely enabled by zero knowledge technology. Like it's not possible to do this well with optimistic rollups, given like the security model of them.
Of
So
course.
like it's a little bit less inside of the narrative right now, but I think is will continue to grow as we kind of demonstrate its capabilities. And so Slot is a way, today the focus is on the developers, again, like continuing to build out the best developer experience for building on-chain games. You can very easily deploy Katana instances and Tori indexers into managed infrastructure with, in a few seconds from the command line. But the roadmap is essentially to enable the fractal scaling paradigm where you can have games, like for example, that use what people are starting to refer to as micro rollups, which is like sits somewhere between a coprocessor and a persistent rollup. It's like a rollup spun up for a specific purpose that exists for like just some short duration, like maybe an hour or whatever, like the duration, for example, of a dungeon run inside of a
Yeah.
game. Sequences a bunch
Okay.
of transaction, proves it, and then settles it.
I
So
see.
yeah, so that's one of the products that we're most focused on in the short
What,
term.
what's the name of this? Because I mean, I just want to. There is a what's the name of this? How do you call it now? Because for me, it was like I used to call them ephemeral chain, but I'm curious what's your name that is coming together at this point.
Yeah, I think I've seen people refer to it as a bunch of different things. Like yeah, like ephemeral rollups is what we were originally thinking of it as, and then there's like stateful coprocessors. It's somewhere in the
Ugh,
spectrum. But now what I've seen people start to refer to them as micro rollups. I don't know if that's like, I mean, it's kind of a bad name, but kind of,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the
Sometimes you just have to go with the flow. Yeah.
coprocessor is definitely the worst one, but but no. To go back to slot, and something I think is going to come up as like very strongly. I mean, slot is to me, and I'm not saying this to please you. I literally say that to many people. Slot is the embodiment of what crypto will look like in 10 years or 20, 5 to 10 years, meaning what I like to call provable servers. They're not L3s, they are provable
Yeah.
servers.
Hmm.
They are servers that can natively integrate themselves into the new financial world that crypto is, and that can make robust and live on forever. Robust as in if you are scaling too much and you need redundance and decentralization become a requirement for you not to get shut down. And may live forever by, as you said, decentralization and making sure that that tech stack, that tool, that word will keep going, living on forever if someone is willing to run it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. And I think it's really the only way to accomplish like the properties that we need, especially for fully on-chain games, where you want very low latency. You want, for example, servers deployed regionally, like close to users to, generally in games, you want to use like a regional server to reduce your latency. Like just
right.
have some physical constraints of the speed of light or whatever. If you have a decentralized rollup and you have to communicate around the whole world, you like inherently have like over 100 milliseconds of latency
Of
for
course.
participants, right? And if
I
you
mean,
want
anyone
to,
who play Counter Strike know that lag above 50 milliseconds is how you die all the time.
yeah, and the only way to do this is by using ZK. I think like optimistic and fraud proofs are great for certain applications, like for global execution context. But if you want to shard execution to this level, where you can have a server spun up, in New York City for players in New York to play a game for an hour and then like settle it on chain and then spin down the sequencer, it's impossible to do in an optimistic architecture. So I agree with you. I think like this is like the long-term approach to scaling compute, like on-chain compute, um, and we're very close to achieving it. But uh, yeah,
I mean, that's to me. I mean, and so the question to you then is like, what do you see? Okay, so Slot and Tori are obviously tool built by Cartridge and probably the go-to market for Cartridge. What interaction with Dojo, and how do you think the Dojo community will feel about using hosted infrastructure versus using locally, this local run on their own? What's the trade-off, and why would someone choose one versus the other?
yeah. I mean, I think so. Dojo itself is a public good, right? Like we have been very intentional in collaboration with other people in the Starknet ecosystem of building Dojo as like a credibly neutral foundation for on-chain games or autonomous worlds because we think it's necessary to achieve like the properties that we want. Like you can't have, a proprietary engine. And to that extent, like a lot of the products that we're providing with Cartridge to the Dojo ecosystem are auxiliary and not like they're not enshrined inside of the framework itself. I think like from like why would people use the cartridge versus cartridge stack versus run operating something locally? I mean, one thing is like that we've seen already is that it's incredibly easy to spin up like a shared sequencer if you want to do like playtesting and stuff like that. Or not, sorry, shared sequencer is the wrong word for it, but like a sequencer that other players can access to, so you can start to play test your game. This by far the easiest way to do it is to use Slot today and to use Tori, and we provide it as a service for free because like Katana is a very efficient sequencer, and the operating overhead for us is like basically zero. So it's something that we can provide, especially in the context of testing for free. So there's no reason not to use it, and we'll continue to push the boundaries on providing the best developer experience. It's the obvious choice to use. I think like the the Dojo stack can be fully run locally, especially when you're developing games, and most people do that. Like I do that. Like I don't develop against like a managed slot instance. Um, I so we there's no like vendor lock-in from that perspective or something. But there's a bunch of stuff that we're working on that I think will become like more and more interesting and make slot like a even more compelling solution. Like one of them is an on-chain game explorer that we're developing that we haven't officially announced yet called World Explorer, which basically like if you deploy a game to slot, it automatically is indexed there and you can use it for distribution of your game. And it's kind of like something similar to Etherscan, but with an understanding of the semantics of a fully on-chain game. So it's a much richer experience and people can start to use it to like kind of explore what is inside of an on-chain game
Or
without uh, without like having to the game developer having to build this tool themselves. Um, there's also, I think, a lot of complexity from architectural, like a DevOps perspective that goes into like the scaling architecture. Like that's one of the trade-offs versus, just running a single like monolithic chain or a sequencer. Operationally, that's a lot simpler than what we're trying to do with fractal scaling, where we're spinning up sequencers on demand in different regions in response to player uh, demand that can spin up and down within seconds, so players can play them immediately, and then handles a lot of the settlement and the cross-chain communication and those kind of things. So I think like that is a core competency of Cartridge that makes sense to share with the rest of the ecosystem. And would be something that would take a lot of time to build in-house, and it's fundamentally the thing that allows you to scale on-chain games to very large audiences. So those are, I think, like some of the reasons why you would use slot versus trying to do something on your own.
yeah, that's super interesting. And so the next question that comes to play is, so there's actually two questions that comes to play here. I'm going to say the first one is you choose Starknet and Cairo and all the tech stack because I mean you can explain why, but um, my question is, what do you see? What makes it different, let's say, than trying to use like, some other tool in the on-chain gaming world, like something like Argus or Mud? Why did you prefer to develop your own tech stack versus using something that others try to build elsewhere?
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, Dojo is the only approach that is like a provable game that like you can generate a zero knowledge proof in this regard. There's very different security trade-offs between something like Argus, I think is probably and I'm not an expert on their model, but like I think is much more focused on um, composability versus like uh, inheriting like the affordances of the blockchain. I think it's like debatably a roll up. Um, Although I don't want to talk shit because I don't know exactly, but the Mud team, we have a great relationship with the Mud team. I think they've made a lot of great contributions to the ecosystem. Um, I think that like there's a large space for us to be complementary to the Mud solution. I think like successful games will probably straddle both optimistic and zero knowledge roll ups and take advantage of both of their capabilities because I think in certain dimensions like some can be better than others. Um, Solidity is a language that was designed for Ethereum with a set of constraints when Ethereum was introduced, which is like very computationally constrained execution environments, and it was never really designed for very complex applications. And we spent a lot of time building on Solidity, and almost all the teams building in the Dojo ecosystem today come from a Solidity background, and like we're banging their heads against things like contract size limits and stuff like that before joining the Starknet ecosystem and starting to take advantages of some of the affordances of Cairo. Now, Cairo is a language, this new language that was developed that took a lot of learnings from Solidity and was designed specifically for building complex on-chain applications. And so it's naturally suited for the types of games that we want to build and has been, like I think provides by far the best developer experience. Um, and that, there's the component of defining the games that live on chain, which Cairo obviously allows you to do. But there's also a whole other space of development that Cairo can support that other approaches can't, which is like things that are executed on the client. So it has this property of like isomorphism, which is like a dimension that we're starting to invest a lot more time in right now in the Dojo ecosystem, which I think is like a very core differentiator of the Dojo approach, which is you can write code in the same language that executes like on the roll up in the shared execution context and is proved, as well as like code that is executed on the client and is proved inside of the browser, for example, or on the user's device. And that opens up a lot of possibilities that are interesting for games, like private information, for example, where you can hide things. You need a lot of games depend on some level of information asymmetry, and you can start to introduce those dynamics very easily from a developer experience perspective. Like these things are possible with the technology, like with zero knowledge proofs and stuff. But in the other ecosystems, you have to basically use a different tech stack to accomplish it. Like you're using like CirCom or something like that. And I think like in Cairo has the unique ability to provide this like natively inside of the developer experience, which I think will be significantly better.
I
Um, yeah.
I mean, I agree. There is something, I mean, just driving crazy right now is that we have those tools and languages that are made for each one for a specific purpose. And what I love at Cal, of course, I'm very biased, but and because I push for it, is to have a language that is both fast at proving, at executing, and also support private input. And I'm not familiar with any other language that has the ability to do it in an efficient way or native way. So
Mm-hmm.
although it's not there, it should be easy to add, and hopefully either you guys or someone else will. So you guys want to build, I mean, to add it. We're working on it, but always happy to have partners to work on it, as you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's generally across the space in different dimensions. There's obviously a lot of gaps that exist in different solutions, and some people are further ahead in some regards, and some people are further ahead in other places. So, yeah, I think we obviously have a lot of faith and commitment to the Starkware team at being the team that invented Starks and has been pushing on this technology for the longest time to continue to innovate and bring like the best solutions to market, and understand that it can take time. But like I maybe have a little bit more information than a lot of people in the audience, but I haven't lost confidence in that being kind of the outcome here.
Makes a lot of sense. And so there is one thing that I'm find extremely inspiring when it comes to Dojo and your work is your ability to gather an extremely strong community and how you managed to pull that off. So my question to you is right now is how many project or games are currently being built? Where are people coming from? Why are they looking into those games? And so what's your take on the next evolution, the go forward from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the community that we've been able to build around Dojo is arguably the most impressive thing that we've done. I mean, you can always build cool technology, but if no one cares about it, then like there's no point. And it's been from the beginning, a collaborative effort in a lot of large degree pushed on by like Sylv and Loaf and a lot of other participants in the Starknet ecosystem, and like for example having like the Realms organization, which is kind of answers your other question as well, fully bought in on the Dojo stack, which is probably the most credible approach or most credible like kind of effort to build an autonomous world today from a organic grounds up perspective. It's been a lot of fun and a big journey, and I think a lot of the success we've had there is just by having a very open collaborative ecosystem where people can jump in and start to contribute early on. Like a lot of those people were coming from the Starknet ecosystem, But we've put a big focus now on expanding and trying to bring more traditional game developers. And one of those efforts is the Game Jam, which we're actually running one starting next week, and it's going to be running for 2 weeks over the holiday. So we run these what we call game jams, where we have prize pools and some set time. We've had two in the past that were 72 hours, and we had a lot of new developers on board to the ecosystem, as well as build like very interesting experiences in that very short amount of time. We're doing a much more ambitious one. So if anyone is interested in kind of getting their feet wet in the Dojo ecosystem, you should definitely check out the Dojo Twitter um, and sign up for it. And we have actually a ninja school hosted tomorrow, which by Loaf, which is going to walk through participants through like the Dojo stack and get them ready, and we'll have some team formation stuff around that. Um, so with the game jams, we're really trying to bring in a lot of more traditional game developers, and we're trying to demonstrate to them that look, like blockchain games aren't just about like hyper financialization and speculation. It's not just about like NFTs and asset ownership. Like from a developer perspective, we can actually create a lot of leverage for game developers where they can bring experiences to life using like the shared infrastructure much more quickly than you can do in the traditional world, like similar to what a DeFi developer is able to do in the financial space, but for the gaming space. Um, and I think like there's a very compelling value proposition there. We've started to see like a lot more people come in from the traditional gaming ecosystem, and I think that it's very important for that to be the case in order for us to be successful.
I mean,
Um,
that's that's so good to hear. I mean, I'm looking very actively, obviously, on the new Cairo dev, and as you know, I tend to try to spot people on your Discord at this point to nerd snipe them. And I mean, I'm very impressed to see a team that has organic growth, and you guys managed to pull that off. And that is honestly one of the hardest thing one can do when it comes to tech adoption. So I mean, this is amazing work, as you know how much I admire what you guys have been doing so far. I just now maybe let's move to something like more personal. You were at Dev Connect a couple of weeks ago, and you were at a conference last week. I'm curious, like what you saw, what was the most interesting topic, the thing that gets you excited, both in crypto and your sub ecosystem or the on-chain gaming world, and what do you see coming out as new narratives, new stories, new things that people will care about?
um, Yeah, I mean, in the on-chain gaming autonomous world space, yeah, there was the Autonomous World Assembly that was hosted in Istanbul that a lot of the Dojo ecosystem attended. It was hosted by Zero X Park, um, and that was really fun to see. I mean, the space has grown so much in the last 2 years. I think like the biggest practical takeaway is like how much progress has been made since a year prior. Like there were like maybe 6 games that were you could play test at the event itself, and a lot of the talks were focused on learnings of actual experiences rather than like the kind of thought pieces or just hypothetical like thought experiments, which is really great that we're starting to like practically ship games and stuff, these experiences into production. Like there's a bunch you can play inside of the Dojo ecosystem right now. I mean, Loot Survivor, which is actually not a Dojo game, but it has been deployed to mainnet Starknet, is one great experience, and then we have like Roll Your Own and Eternum, and there's a bunch of other like cool games inside of the Dojo ecosystem that you can play around with. If you join the Discord, we can kind of direct people in there. So I think like the practical reality that these things are possible now, and people are starting to build like interesting experiences, and with very small teams, is my biggest takeaway. I think like the baseline tooling is there in both the mud ecosystem and Dojo ecosystem to support this. We're very focused now, and like generally, I would say the ecosystem is very focused now on productionalizing these applications. So everything right now is running in test nets. I think next year we'll start to see these games like run on gaming specific infrastructure in production versus today, like you can deploy it to Starknet or you can deploy it to like base, but these rollups are primarily focused on DeFi and not great for on-chain gaming experiences. More specifically in the on-chain gaming ecosystem, I think people are starting to focus now more on introducing hidden information and privacy into games, which is an interesting frontier to push on, and aligns well with the momentum in the rest of the ecosystem in DeFi and MEV and the ZK stuff. There's also like an interesting strand of incorporating like machine learning or AI on chain in the Starknet ecosystem. There's the Orion project that you can do like pretty interesting experiments with Dojo and start to have, to some extent like on-chain NPCs or probabilistic models to control your games. So those are like all very interesting like developments specifically in the on-chain gaming ecosystem. Like more broadly, we're still operating in a very early niche. There's a bunch of people that are very passionate about it that are part of the community, and it continues to grow quite rapidly, but relatively speaking, it's still very small. Last week I was at like the Future of Gaming event, which was hosted like by Bitcraft and Fabric and some others in Helsinki. And like the interesting thing, it wasn't like focused on-chain games, but almost all of the presentations to some extent mentioned on-chain games. So I think there's definitely, a shift in the narrative. Like a lot of the people that were previously building games that, like just had the minimal integration necessary with the blockchain, which was just asset ownership, and then the rest of the game fully lives off-chain, are starting to like explore on-chain gaming. And, I think naturally the people that kind of rode the last narrative will be excited to write the new narrative, which is starting to emerge as like autonomous worlds, in my opinion. So that was like an interesting insight there, and I think like obviously represents a lot of opportunity, but also potentially like a lot of risk to like the ethos of the space. So it's something that we're quite conscious about and want to help like facilitate in a positive way. So.
So, so,
Yeah.
so when it comes to facilitate, there is something I want to. I mean, I realize that I don't think we went to the bottom of what Throat enables, and one of the things that is very important when it comes to gaming is performance, as you said, network performance, redundance, all of that. Uh, how many like transaction or like event can happen in Katana right now, or like in slot, to be specific, and what are the next generation? How do you plan to scale that to get to what are the right performance requirement, and when are you expecting them to hit them?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say like what is the right performance requirements. I think like baseline, you need very low latency, right? Like throughput is a number that like depends a lot on the type of game. I mean, generally more throughput is obviously better, but latency I think is one of the most important things for games, is like the ability of a user to take some action and for that like the outcome of that action to be reflected very quickly, um, so that they the experience feels interactive. It's not like LPing a position on like Uniswap or something where you can like sit and send a transaction and check back 30 minutes later. You want to, have like a lot of quick interactions, potentially in some like shared execution context with other players. So that's, one of the things that we're most focused on is like, what are the modifications that we can make to the Katana sequencer to enable basically, almost instantaneous transaction confirmation. And so, Katana and Slot, we operate centralized sequencers. That is basically the only way to achieve this property. You can deploy them regionally close to people to get like very low latency, just like over the network. You can put them on powerful machines, and you can optimize like the VM for execution. So the Cairo VM is relatively fast itself, like given that it's written in Rust. But there's other approaches like Cairo native is like orders of magnitude faster, and so something that we're interested in exploring. And then as part of that, there is some security trade-offs that you make with centralized sequencing, mostly around censorship resistance. And another area that we're doing some research is like how to mitigate that. Kind of one of the approaches is to run Katana sequences inside of a secure enclave, which allows everything to be fully end-to-end encrypted. So that's something that we're working on as well.
I mean, and for perspective, I know you all personally come from traditional game design or game gaming, the traditional gaming environment. I think for maybe not all listeners have like the perspective of what are performance requirements, let's say, to play a game, let's say a multiplayer Pong, or a multiplayer I don't know what's his name of this RPG, or like Counter-Strike. What are the requirements for each sort of category of game? So we can imagine. I mean, it would help me imagine sort of like the each generation of game, and what the improvement will provide to get to those games. Like until basically when we will get to run Counter-Strike in slot.
Yeah, I think Counter-Strike is quite ambitious. No one is really focused on bringing FPS on chain. The FPSs are by far the most demanding genre of games. You have a lot of a lot of throughput necessary for like the bullets and everything to be on chain, a lot of computation, and it has to be very low latency to provide for competitive players. Most of the games that people are focusing on are kind of like RTS style games, trading card games, like RPG, like MMORPG. I think a lot of those games fit very well into the constraints of the blockchain. Like MMORPG, like World of Warcraft, you can easily play with, over 100 millisecond latency, and it doesn't like massively affect the player experience. If you like look at games that have like more high intensity of like interactions between players, I would say like your rule of thumb of like kind of, I think less than 100 milliseconds is doable, but competitive players want like sub 50 milliseconds, like ideally even below that. So I think these things are accomplishable because one common misconception is that like the proving overhead of a language is incurred like during the runtime, which is not true. Like in a sequencer like Katana, for example, we with something like Cairo native, when we have that integrated, you're basically just doing native computation just like a traditional server, and the sequencer is just deciding the order of transactions, and you don't actually have any of the overhead outside of some like low-level implementation details of the Cairo language that is incurred during like the actual execution and sequencing in real time at runtime. All of the overhead of proving is something that happens asynchronously and can be like massively parallelized. So I think like there's a very tractable path to putting a lot of these experiences on chain. The bigger question is like in an FPS, you just have such a massive amount of computation that needs to be proved, and will it be like financially make sense to prove so much computation for the experience? I don't know. I mean, it's an open question, and obviously there's significant process in driving down proving costs as well that is hard to predict. But like if we're 2 orders of magnitude cheaper in next year than we are this year, like it unlocks a lot of new use cases as well.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. There is another direction. I'm sure you're aware, but something that Caro supports, but we haven't actually implemented yet in terms of parallelization, which is something called linear typing. And I'm curious, if you're familiar with this, have you thought about it in the context of a game? And if so, how can a dev that listens to us right now can use this type of programming to improve the performance? What do you see? If you're not familiar, we can skip the question. I'm just curious if you are. Is it something that is used in traditional gaming, and how do you take advantage of this for a game?
Yeah, I'm familiar with like linear typing and like the practical implications of it, like for like people in the audience. Basically, like what linear typing enables you to do is do parallel transaction execution, because you can like statically understand the dependencies of a transaction. So you can massively improve like your execution throughput by just parallelizing everything. Like one of the challenges with Ethereum, for example, today, or in basically every rollup that's using Geth or Reth or one of these implementations, is that you have to execute everything sequentially, because a transaction might modify some piece of state that a subsequent transaction depends on. And if that's the case, like then you have like some conflict and you have to do re-execution. So there's like approaches like optimistic re-execution, which where you just like parallelize everything, and if like stuff that has dependencies, because you could the only way to find out the dependencies if you don't have linear typing is by actually doing the execution. Then you just like rerun them sequentially, which I think Starknet had at one point, and I think people have looked at this. Linear typing is like a fundamental property of the language that allows you to like before the actually executing something, understand these dependencies so you can like parallelize things without these conflicts. And so there's obviously unlocking like more performance would be great for games. I think it's an interesting fundamental property. I don't know where we are at being able to leverage it in the Starknet ecosystem. It seems like of all the things, like pretty low on the set of priorities right now. But
Yeah, but the
I think
language supports it. The
yeah,
language supports it.
yeah,
You could implement it at the sequencing level on your end. I think that's what I was trying to go to say.
yeah, yeah. It's a good question. I don't know exactly what it entails to implement at the sequencer. Like, do we need to modify like Cairo VM, or like I don't know
I
where
think it's just
exactly
on
what.
the. I mean, I think it just means probably to run to check if the transaction is only linearly typed or not, and then you can run it on multiple thread, I guess. But that's my. I'm you're no better than I do, of course, as you perfectly know. Um, there is one last thing that maybe we want to touch, unless you have other topics that you want to address, is um, something that is being talked about a lot lately, very high up in the. There's two actually topics. They're being high up, and I want to know which one is the most interesting to you and which one you want to address first. There is a question of account abstraction, or what we call smart wallet or smart account, and the second question is the emergence of new data availability layer, and I'm curious, how do you guys plan to use them? And if so, what is the most interesting to you between this smart account and data availability, and what do you think will stem out from those two major breakthroughs in crypto?
Mhm. I mean, I think they're both very important in different dimensions. I mean, like kind of abstraction of smart accounts, like obviously is massive for onboarding new users to games and being able to, like for example, like one approach that we can do is we can just create a burner wallet in the browser and the user can play a game, and then like if they at the end of the game they can actually create their wallet. So instead of like you can move a lot of the overhead to onboarding from away from like the from the beginning of the experience and rather to the end of it, right? Where the user has like a more of a value, like it has like a stronger value proposition and is more willing to incur some overhead to like unlock like loot in a game or something like that. So I think like that is really important to like shift that burden for onboarding new users. Argent's obviously doing a really great job in the Starknet ecosystem in this regard. I don't know, you know, we'll see how much resources it makes sense for us to spend on this, given that Argent is already doing a great job. We want to just focus on like our core capabilities. Alternate data availability solutions, I think, is obviously like powerful. Um, and given that 90% plus of the transaction costs in Starknet today is around data availability costs of checkpointing like state diffs to Ethereum, is a big unlock if you can operate like volitions. I think it's going to change significantly with 4844. And I don't know exactly what that will end up looking like. Also, with the way that we operate sequencers, is you can you uh, the goal is to basically be able to compress like a massive sequence of events into a single proof and a single state diff, right? So like the data availability footprint can be very small. It could, literally just be like a single Boolean value that was like you completed the dungeon, right? And if you like completed the dungeon and it's like, okay, like when you settle that transaction, some on-chain logic can say like, okay, this player finished like, running like molten core, like give them loot for all the different bosses kind of thing. At an extreme, I think it'll be more than that. But that's like one fundamental difference as well with this approach versus optimistic rollups, where you can't really achieve that. And so I think like there's a good path for us putting these types of games on into production. and fully inheriting the security of Ethereum versus like having to make security trade-offs and use like alternative data availability solutions. But I think there's probably, there's still a bunch of use cases where it will make sense to use alternative data availability solutions like Celestia and Polygon Avail and those kind of things as well. So it's definitely something we're interested in supporting as well.
Amazing, amazing. So, I mean, we're running soon out of time, so I just want to make sure that you have no more topic you want to address, and if not, I can move on probably to a couple of questions before finishing up this hour with you and all the awesome information you gave us.
Yeah, I mean, nothing else off the top of my head. I just want to again shout out and reiterate the Dojo ecosystem is a very collaborative, open ecosystem, and a lot of people building cool stuff. If you have any interest in joining it, check out the Twitter handle at ohio_dojo, and join the Discord. Participate in the Ninja School tomorrow. Join the game jam. We're gonna have, I think at this point it's like over like 50K in prizes, as well as a secret surprise that we haven't announced yet, I believe, but maybe we'll announce shortly. A track with some bounties, and we're going to have like the Unity SDK will be ready, for example, at Dojo, which is going to be exciting. So, just encourage everyone to check it out. And even if you're not a developer and you have ideas for games, like it's a good place to share those ideas. Or just to play games and give feedback and get involved in the ecosystem. I think it's a very exciting space, and I think it's a if you're interested in these kind of things, it's a great way to get involved.
Amazing. So let's take a couple of questions. Two questions from the audience. So raise your hand, and I will request to speak, and I will let you speak. If no one is trying, I will 1 more minute, and if there is no question, I would just thank you all. Just waiting. Okay. Seems like not seeing anyone. There's a lot of tweets.
A lot of tweets.
Yeah,
just posted. We just released an article that talks about provable games that you can check out. I replied to the spaces with it. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely go check that out.
Request. There is a one request, which is, let me add a speaker. King, how are you? He's struggling a bit. Yeah, it takes time. Thanks, X, for working so well. Thanks, Elon. There is another one. Gink. Okay, I'm gonna try with Gink. Okay, Gink can talk now. Gink, can you speak? No, he can't. Interesting. He can speak. Okay, Gink, can you ask a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, probably you guys know me, but yeah, still I'm curious about like when it's going to be actually provable on chain, because right now I've read through like Terrence's paper just now, and yeah, since I've been a Dojo fan, I actually got a hit on like Isaac from Topology, and after that they released the Shoshin, and I've been playing it for a pretty long time, I guess. So right now, I understand. By my understanding, is like Shoshin is right now a totally provable game, but rather than like on-chain verifiable game.
Shoshin takes an interesting approach where basically they implemented almost like their own interpreter on chain, and they have like a language designed for the game, and you create like the sequence off chain, and then you submit it for verification on chain. The to your question of like when is Katana like provable in production, like like on mainnet, I think it'll probably be like January or February next year with the compatibility with Sharp. From my understanding, there's a bunch of efforts like in parallel to make this happen, and we have resources focused specifically on it. it's for settlement to Ethereum. So basically, like aggregating Katana proofs with all of the other Stark proofs that are generated in the Starknet, like StarkX, whatever ecosystem, and settling that onto Ethereum. And then there's an in parallel effort to settle Katana nodes to Starknet, which will, I think is in a similar time frame, which will, I think, probably be one of the cheapest venues to settle Katana chains. And that'll be, I think, also towards the end of February. And then we have another, sorry.
No. I mean, it's straight fire, man. Like either gotta be Denver or London. I'll definitely try it out.
Yeah. The goal is for ETH Denver. Another thing that we're trying to do that people don't, I think, aren't aware that this is possible, but like because you have this ability to aggregate all the Stark proofs and verify them, like basically for free on Ethereum, is to make those proofs and the associated facts available on other rollups. Like so for like Base and like Binance or Optimism and stuff, and even like Redstone from the Mud team, to enable people to take advantage of the affordances of Dojo, while still interoperating with like some existing on-chain infrastructure or applications or smart contracts that they have potentially deployed in the EVM world. So that's another parallel effort that we're working on. I don't have it. We're still figuring out the approach, but something that we ideally want in Q1 next year as well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. It's music to my ears. Thank you.
Awesome. There was one person who was supposed to speak, but they renounced. So I think we are gonna wrap up. Thank you so much, Terence, for all the amazing comments and insights about what you guys are building, what the on-chain gaming world looks like, what Dojo does, and all the get the excitement of Ginks going also. That's basically prove that you're doing something right. And more than that, as I said, I keep telling people how exciting I am by what you guys are building. There is one last person, Kube, speaking. I will have to go very soon, so maybe if you want to ask a question, and we can answer very, very briefly because I have a hard stop in 1 minute. Okay, just say okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So perfect. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Terence. Have a great day and enjoy build games. We want them more of them.
All right. Thanks for having us. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.